I'm trying not to take it as an editorial comment that you did a requiem before I started preaching. Like, it's already a dead on the spot kind of thing. But that is not necessarily true, but the reality is, as I say every week, a sermon is something we make together. I come in with thoughts and hopes, I try to plan them, try to pull them into some semblance of order, but it happens not out of my mouth, but in your ears. Like great music, a great sermon is a collaborative effort. So I invite your hope as ever to make a great sermon with me, with your eagerness, with your willingness to listen, with your occasional laugh and the occasional nod of the sad forehead. Let us say something together that gives a fragment more of hope and promise in a world too often gray. Therefore, may these words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my redeemer. Since I grew up in a house that played a lot of jazz on the record player, I became familiar with the idea of improvising as a way of life. And the reality is I got a really good sermon going at the early service. I'm hoping you guys will jump in and make a good one this time too. I was thinking about rules, as you can tell. One of the reasons I'm thinking about rules is because of the meeting we're holding as a congregation to settle on a new set of rules. Another reason I'm thinking about rules is because, like it or not, we depend upon them in important ways, even when we don't like them. We probably don't like them when we find ourselves at, say, Fulton and Jefferson at 2 a.m. and the light's red, and there's nobody else there. Do I really have to stop? Well, yeah, you do, but if no one can see you, it's like that tree falling in the woods thing, and every now and then you decide that you go around the corner and there's another tree with a little flashing light letting you know that the rules really do apply. Rules are tough. We know we should have them. We know that we don't like them, and how many of them are too many and too few. This conversation started making sense to me when I visited Fountain Club a few weeks back. I have to use my long-distance eyes now. This is a new feature in my life. So now if I look more than 6 feet away, I need to put on a pair of glasses, and less than 2 feet away, so I'm going to be playing the glasses dance. I was too vain to go to bifocals, what can I tell you? But I really like to see the people out there and recognize them. Reality is that it gets harder. But now I have to look under my glasses to see my notes. So I'm at Fountain Club, see, that's our high school group, and they meet most every Sunday afternoon, and I'm visiting with them to talk with them about the bottle drive they're going to do. And they start every meeting with what they call a check-in, when everybody has a moment to say a word or two that's important to who they are. And Todd Johnson, bless him, also gives them a question to answer, because we know how teenagers love to chat. They're really kind of glum creatures. And so he sponsors this by saying, name a rule in your house. And they had a lot of answers. And I asked the same question of the early service, and I asked it of younger people. Young people always know the rules. It's grown-ups who muddy the water here. One of them held up her hand and said, what's a rule in your house? And she said, no jumping on the bed. Good rule. That's a good, solid rule. I think that applies even to grown-ups. Probably more to grown-ups. No running in the house would be another one. You know the rules in your house. I won't ask you to shout them out, but they're usually pretty simple things. Turn off the lights, shut the door. Do you live in a barn? That kind of thing. Clean your plate. Those sorts of things. When it came around to me at Fountain Club, my answer was, this is easy. It's the same rule now that it was when I was a kid. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. But you'll notice that's really not a rule. That's a guideline. It gives you something to aspire toward. And I want to come back to that notion later. What I want to do is talk about the phenomenon of rules, because we all know they exist, whether we're doing bylaws or it's happening in Congress or in Lansing. And sometimes we wonder if they have any concept as to what the outcomes of all the rules are. There's a contest, I think, going on in our country between those who think we have too many rules and those who think we have too few. At the moment, those who define themselves as progressive think things are just too unstructured. We need to rein in the banks. We need to tell the credit people how to be nice. We should be doing more stuff around the environment. And this strikes a whole other group of people as tyranny run amok, with everything being written down like Miss Umbridge in Harry Potter, with little things posted on the door at every 10 minutes. So eventually, like T.H. White noticed in The Once and Future King, it'll be like an anthill in which it says everything not prohibited is required. And I tell you this because I am not a Tea Party advocate at all. But I am alert to the sensitivity that it is possible to be too eager to name all the rules, to pin down all the exigencies, that we can eventually bind ourselves into difficult corners. And I'm alert to that. And I'm also alert to the sense of chaos in the world, that things are spinning out of control in the world, that the internet lets us know instantaneously which country is having which riot, which price is going up, where the gas is cheapest, where everything is changing. The volatility of daily life is everywhere. So I can understand the desire to simplify, to get back to basics. There was a program my wife is fond of, which doesn't mean I don't enjoy it, but she's the one who knows where it is and all the buttons that we have at home. It's Bill Maher's program on HBO. You've seen that maybe. It has some rough language in it, so I assume if you watch it, you're comfortable with that, but I will not reiterate any of it here. But the question came up about what the Constitution has in it, and there was a Tea Party advocate who literally had a Constitution in her pocket, whipping it out like a scripture, and pointed out that it didn't say in this Constitution anything about the Environmental Protective Agency. And the person on the left, I assume, said it doesn't say anything about whether or not I can make love to my wife, but I assume it's okay. There's a gulf that we feel in our country now between too much and too little, and the desire to try to get back to a known set of rules we can all depend on, that we know is right, that we can hang our head on. And of course, that's the whole point of those things we call the 10 Commandments, to try to boil it all down to 10 pretty easy rules, one for each finger. How hard can it get? And yet, if I were to ask you to name all 10, most of you would strike out pretty soon after you got past 4 or 5. Even 10 seems to be a lot of rules for some people. This rule thing is hard. It's really, really hard. About 10,000 years ago, or actually more like 2,000 years ago, in ancient Rome, actually in ancient Palestine, where the Romans were occupying it, there was a famous rabbi by the name of Hillel, for which Hillel House is named. He was that famous. And I have to do this on the stage, so guys, careful. This is a visual. I'll be back in the pulpit, I guarantee. So, Rabbi Hillel's walking down the street, and a Roman soldier says, "Jew!" And Romans all had spears, so we can imagine him having a spear. "Jew!" And so Rabbi Hillel stops and says, "Yes, sir, what may I do for you?" He said, "You're Rabbi Hillel, aren't you?" And he says, "Yes, I am." The Roman says, "You know the law." "Yes, I do." And of course, if you know the law, it's a big book. And he says, "I command you to stand on one foot and recite the whole of the Torah." And Rabbi Hillel said, "Give me a second. What is hateful to you, do not do to another." That's the whole law. Now go and study. Hillel makes two very important points. The rules we need to live by are extraordinarily few. No jumping on the bed. Close the door. Be nice. That's really about it. But it's really hard to do that really well. And that's the challenge. Because as William Blake said, as I quoted earlier, Jesus was all virtue. He acted from impulse, not from rules. But we are none of us all virtue. We have some venality in us. We've stolen the last cookie from time to time, haven't we? You've decided that red light really wasn't all that red, didn't you? We've all cut corners, and we have to, because there is no perfect virtue. We are incapable of it, and we shouldn't even try to believe we can be perfect. I don't care what Jesus says, be ye perfect. Talk to some other guy, geez, that's not me. And yet, we know we can be better. We know we have to be better, because if we all took the last cookie, there would never be one cookie, ever. If we all ran the red light, there would be a lot more dead people. If we left the door open, we would have used up all the oil a long time ago. And yet we know that the spiritual life is not one of following rules, not even 10 rules. It is our urge to do the one thing, to be good to each other. Somewhere in our wonderful hymn book, and I'm going to find it for you, is a wonderful Muslim prayer or a request that this and this alone is true religion, to serve each other. It doesn't need prayer robes or carpets or rosaries. And yet we know that we all want the prayer robes and the carpets and the rosaries. We still need them, even when we know that the thing we need to do is just to be kind, which is all the Dalai Lama says his religion is, to be kind. And yet we need all the stuff to do the simpler things. It is the enigma of rules that we need so very few, and yet we need so much help in understanding the few that exist. And this is old news. It is old news.